know those really clever movies and books that start at the end and then they use the rest of the time to fill in all the context? Well, I'm going to try and do the same thing with the Astra, and I'm going to give you my verdict first. I think that the new Opel Astra is absolutely brilliant and is now one of the best family hatchbacks in its segment. But if you want to know why I think that, then keep watching. Now, I'm not really going to talk about the outside because I can't tell you what to think about style. It's very subjective. But what I can tell you about the inside is that I feel like I have far more room in here than I did in the old model Astra. I not only have more leg room, more shoulder space, more headroom, so do the rear passengers, and the boot space is very generous. So in all, if this was bought as a family car or a second family car, maybe with 2 or 3 kids, would it make a lot of sense? Yes, it would. When it comes to interior kit, well, I think they've made a massive improvement in here, and this is where they really needed to make the biggest improvement, because they've gotten rid of a lot of the buttons and the clutter in the dash here, and they've given us a much bigger, brighter colour touchscreen display. And they've also gotten rid of some of their Opel proprietary IntelliLink system. It's still there in the background all right, but now you have Apple Carplay, which mirrors the functionality of some of the apps on my phone. So I have Spotify, and I can also make calls and use my maps here. This is now very much of its time and as good as anything else on the market. Right, let's talk about the engine, chassis and the gearbox and knock them out of the park as quickly as possible. The easiest one to talk about is the gearbox, because there really isn't that much to explain. It goes in and out of gears nice and easily, and the clutch is nice and light. Simple, that's done. Chassis and suspension. Well, I go over bad roads a lot where I live, and also I've driven this on motorways, and it's shone regardless of the road surface. So again, unless you're a bit of a speed merchant and you're throwing it into bends, I don't think you're going to upset the suspension or the chassis. But the engine is probably the most interesting of all, because this is a petrol engine, a 1-litre petrol engine at that as well. And if you have traditionally bought diesel cars, but you're only doing 15 to 18,000 kilometers a year, but because of Irish people's obsession with diesel cars and low tax, they went and bought diesel cars, I think you might need to look at this new little petrol engine. It's only 190 euros a tax, it's very fuel efficient, and more importantly, in town, it's nice and quiet. And now lastly, onto the topic of price, because that's really the one that matters most, isn't it? Well, I'm going to ignore the entry-level price at 19,995, and I'll also ignore the fact that this one has 1,300 euros worth of IntelliLux lights, which are very fancy indeed, and instead just focus on the one that most people are going to buy. It's going to cost you in and around 23 to 25,000 euros, depending on which spec that you go for, but the volume selling specs are all around that price, and that puts it squarely in line with everything else in that market. Focus, Auris, 308, everything, Seed, i30, they're all in and around that price. And where before I would have said that an Astra might seem a little bit expensive when you put them up against the competition, now it's as good and better than a lot of them. So I suppose I can finish the way I started. The verdict on this thing still remains: it's an excellent family hatchback.